Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Monir El Azzouzi from easymedicaldevice.com. And today we will talk about FDA registration, not the 510K as we have done many times or PMA. We'll go for the one that we call DeNovo. If you remember, we discussed about that also with Michel Lott from Linraka, where we talked about this specific way of registration. But this time we wanted to go the real route, if I can say, with the real example with the company. And I have with me Spencer Jones from Lineus Medical, who will be helping us to understand the journey they went through with their products through the DeNovo process. So Spencer, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Monir. Happy to be here.
Great. Thank you for joining, and thank you for providing your experience and teaching us a bit of all the journey that you went through, because I think it's something that maybe can be helpful also for people that are listening to us. But before that, maybe can we have a small introduction of yourself so that we have a better understanding of what you are doing and what's maybe the products that we'll talk about in a few minutes?
Yeah. So Spencer Jones, I'm a registered nurse by trade from Fayetteville, Arkansas in the United States. I graduated nursing school in 2013, was out working as a nurse, med-surg night shift, and I really experienced some problems firsthand, specifically around IV complications with, peripheral IV catheters used for infusions, right? And it was really out of experience, that problem, that I ended up, kind of creating Safe Break Vascular, which we'll talk about in a second, and then founding Lineus Medical around that. And that happened in 2015. That's when I left the bedside, kind of jumped into entrepreneurship, started the company, and kind of set on the course for where I ended up today. So it's a little bit, you don't commonly see registered nurses that start medical device companies. I do know a few that are out there, but I'll just say, my experience as a nurse has been incredibly valuable throughout this process. So happy to be here and excited for this discussion. I think it's going to be a really rich discussion for your audience.
Exactly. Just one question maybe before to start. So did you have any experience on medical devices regulation before that, or medical device before that, apart from using them as a nurse?
No, I'd say not at all. When you're in nursing school and kind of even before nursing school in college, your kind of path through university is really focused on kind of anatomy, physiology, microbiology. And then when you get in nursing school, your schedule is so full, you're not allowed to take kind of business classes, really. You don't have time for it. So really, when I was getting into this, I had, not only did I not have any regulatory training or experience, I didn't have any really practical business experience from a kind of a business administration or management standpoint. But, I was able to learn a lot of those things through some accelerator programs. And these are kind of called different things. Sometimes they're accelerator programs. Sometimes they're called incubator programs. But, they'll select a handful of businesses, usually invest a small amount of money into each business. And the ones that I did, we've done a couple since the company's founding, but the real initial one was a 13-week course, 13-week almost boot camp style accelerator program focused on medical devices. It was actually called 0 to 510K,
okay,
and based out of Memphis, Tennessee. But all of that to say, that is where I really cut my teeth and learned about, quality management systems, the regulatory pathways, patents, clinical trials and studies, business management, all of that stuff.
No, but it's great because when I had the presentation of the company before we are doing this podcast, and when we said that, you will be doing the presentation, I was saying, but it has no regulatory knowledge. So how can we have a great discussion? But when we prepared the episode, I mean, you had really great regulatory knowledge. You had passed through all this. And at the end, you were kind of, he knows about that. Oh, he knows about that. Oh, he knows about that. Wow, great. So I was really impressed. So I think it will be really helpful for the audience here.
Yeah.
So just maybe for a quick introduction of the product now, because we'll spend some time on discussing this product. So what product did you invent? What was not available on the market that you said, I have to create that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So our primary product, the one that we invented, took through the DeNovo, is called Safe Break Vascular. So it's a first of its kind force activated separation device. And, a lot of people say, it's the first of its kind. No, this really was the first of its kind. Hence the FDA wanting us to go DeNovo. And I'm going to show a demo for those that are watching it on video. If you're watching it or if you're listening on audio, you got to jump over to the video, but I'll describe it in detail. So this is SafeBreak Vascular. It's a little device about 2.4 inches. And it goes in the patient's infusion line in between that long IV tubing from the pump and then the patient's vascular access device, right? So there's usually the catheter, a little bit of extension tubing. So SafeBreak just connects basically in between that extension tubing off of the catheter and that long IV tubing from the pump. So whenever there's a damaging level of force on the line, right? So say a patient trips over the tubing, right? Or there's a patient transfer from the bed to a gurney or maybe to the wheelchair, or they're toileting, whatever the cause, right? Whenever there's a damaging level of force greater than 4 pounds, SafeBreak intentionally separates, right, into two pieces. One side stays with the IV tubing from the pump. One side stays with the patient's kind of extension tubing on their catheter. And so it offloads that harmful tension from the IV line to protect the IV catheter. Once it separates, those two separated ends seal on both sides. So that's going to prevent any blood loss from the patient side and also prevent medication loss from that IV tubing side. Right. And so what's that? That's going to cause the infusion pump to start beeping, right? Because it senses there's an occlusion. So that alerts the nurse to come in and investigate. And then all you have to do is replace the two separated components with a new, new fresh SafeBreak that's sterile. And then you can get that infusion back going. And I'll note one other point too: SafeBreak physically can't be put back together. So once it separates, even if a patient or family member tries to put it back together, it physically can't be put back together. And so that's the short and sweet of it. And, really, people, this concept has been used throughout industries. If you had an old MacBook charger, they had the magnet on them, right? Gas station pumps, if you leave the hose in, they've got a breakaway knuckle on the line. So if someone pulls away, there's not gas spewing everywhere. It doesn't tear up the car, right? So this concept is not really new, breakaway concept. It was just new for this application, right? For IV therapy. And final point I'll say about this, whenever people hear or see this device, their mind immediately goes to, people pulling their IVs out, right? You're going to prevent dislodgement, which dislodgement is kind of the full removal of the entire catheter and the dressing, et cetera. But what we've found over the past, 6-7 years of doing this is that IV catheters, really, they fail for two reasons: either trauma or contamination, right? Contamination would be infection, or, it gets occluded because blood product, right? And that fibrin, fibrinogen, those blood proteins clog the catheter, right? That's the contamination. But the trauma piece, that traumatic movement of the catheter, it can cause irritation of the vein, phlebitis. It can cause infiltration, which the catheter is infusing outside of the vein, right? Or it can cause dislodgement. So really what we found is when you remove those harmful forces, you can do a lot more than reduce dislodgement. You can put a dent in infiltration and phlebitis as well. And that's what we saw in our pivotal randomized controlled trial that we did.
I think it's great. I mean, when you describe it, we are like, it's logic. Why it was not invented before? Why it's not something that was already existing? But yeah, I think it's really great. And but as you say, it's the first of its kind. So as you've said, also when you start to do this entrepreneurship, you are more in the design. Say we have to do this, have to do that, and then you have this world that is called regulatory, that is called FDA. So how do you? I mean, what was your experience going through this? I mean, since when now? Since when are you now registered within the FDA? So since when is your products now on the market and it's registered with the FDA?
Yeah. So we officially received FDA clearance, Class 2 DeNovo clearance from the FDA in May of 2021. And I can kind of talk through a little bit of the regulatory journey if you'd like. We really early on, I mean, like I'm talking in the first 3 months of founding the company, kind of attached ourselves to a really knowledgeable regulatory consulting group. MRC Global is the name. So we really, because we knew the regulatory piece of this is huge. Everything has to be building to that regulatory clearance: design, development, customer discovery, getting those design inputs. And so we wanted to go 510K. That was the plan all along. So we were driving towards that, even though we knew that we were unique in the sense that we're the first thing that's going to intentionally separate in the line. There were other things, stopcocks, needless connectors, similar place, similar, flow control, intended use, right? Similar materials, polycarbonate, ABS, silicone, all of that. So we thought that we were going to be able to 510K off of those. And, as we were going through that process with the FDA, pretty late in the game, late into our 510K review, they said, look, we've kind of taken a new look at this, and we think you're too unique. And we think you need to go DeNovo. So our original FDA submission was in April of 2018.
Okay.
And we didn't end up getting clearance until May of 2021. So that was really like a 3-year kind of regulatory period.
For the audience that are maybe listening, so for when we talk about 510K, so normally in the US, the 510K is you are trying to look at a similar product that is on the market. And when we talk about similar, it's not similar, exactly similar. The principle is similar. Yeah. So it's like we talk about a car. So it's a car, it's a truck, or it's not like a BMW or Mercedes or whatever. It's really the same similarity in terms of the product. And apparently there was no similarity for your device.
Yeah, and the criteria for the FDA, you're absolutely right. With the 510K is you have to pick devices that are a device or a device or two devices that are substantially equivalent. That's the phrase, right? So substantially equivalent. A lot of that is kind of materials and the things that kind of what it's made of. But then a big piece of that is the intended use or the indications for use, right? So even though from a material standpoint, we were very, very, very similar to other things on the market, but our intended use and our indications for use were different enough that that's what really caused them to kind of make that shift. Because we had really crossed that hurdle in terms of, once you submit your 510K, very early on, you clear the RTA checklist. We had passed that. That's basically them saying, we deem your predicate devices as substantially equivalent. So that's why it was kind of a shock to us when they kind of said, you know what, we're going back on that. You're DeNovo. You're too unique.
So, did you have, how is it working? So did you have a pre-submission meeting with them and discussion, or it was, then you created all the 510K, sent to them and they refused? How was it exactly, this interaction with them?
Yeah, so we didn't do a pre-submission meeting, and we can talk about that more later, but I wish we would have. But we didn't anticipate that this would be an overly complex 510K. We thought we had a pretty high confidence level that we'd be able to get through with a pretty traditional 510K. The DeNovo pathway is a lot longer. Usually they require clinical data, and usually it's pretty rigorous clinical data, not just safety and efficacy data. But and a lot of 510Ks don't require clinical data. So, we actually did a 40 patient trial, 40 patients getting safe break. It was not randomized or controlled or randomized or anything. There was no control group. It was just device group. But that was a great safety and efficacy study. We showed safety, we showed efficacy. We presented that to the FDA during our 510K. And that helped, but still the ultimate linchpin was their determination that we needed to go DeNovo, which ended up caused them to ask for additional clinical data. But we did not do a pre-submission. We were trying to kind of race towards the quickest and easiest path, which at the time we thought was 510K.
So to do a clinical trial, so you had to you had to hire another consultant to do that, or you are doing that by yourself? How did it work exactly?
Yeah. So, for us, it really started with finding a facility and a principal investigator that were willing to do the study. We sponsored the study, but we were not involved with the data collection. We did partner with, again, Memphis Regulatory MRC Global. They helped kind of with the staffing. There's kind of a blend of, you've got the principal investigator at the facility. Usually they have a research coordinator or two on staff that help with the data collection. And then the regulatory consultant kind of just is more looking over their shoulder to make sure that protocols are being followed, the data is complete, we're not missing anything, adverse events are being tracked, kind of all of those little pieces. So that was really where it started. And that process really of you find the facility and the principal investigator, you develop the protocol, you work with the IRB, staff it, budget for it, and then execute.
So 40 patients, was it your decision at the beginning, or it was their decision of FDA? How did this come here?
Yeah, no, the sample size selection, we did some statistical analysis. So during that protocol development, we did a statistical analysis to say, okay, if our primary endpoint is safety and efficacy, then what do we need to, how many samples, how many patients do we need to power the study to a statistically significant level to prove safety and efficacy? And so that really drove the sample size for that study.
And so at that point, if I can say, you started to have this first interaction with the FDA, it was failing. So you moved to not DeNovo, then you have to do a clinical trial, then you have to do so. What was on your mind as an entrepreneur that was doing this for the first time, if I can say, what was on your mind at that point? Was it like, oh, I thought it would be easier, or what's exactly your thought there?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, our team was really discouraged, I would say, and frustrated, because it's a very simple device, right? It's not rocket science. It was deemed by the IRB, as an insignificant or non-significant risk device, right? So we were frustrated, a lot, and along the way, when you're a startup pre-FDA clearance, you are just burning money. You can't make money. You're just burning money, and so whenever they say, "Hey, you've got to go DeNovo now," to us that means, okay, this is another year, maybe year and a half of us not getting clearance, us not generating revenue. So obviously you have to make a ton of adjustments. You have to push out your sales and marketing plans, sales and marketing hires. You have to raise more capital. So it was a gut check for sure, but it took a lot of determination to kind of get over it. And we always knew it would happen. It was just a matter of when, and we were just very anxious and ready for it to happen.
Okay, so I suppose the design part was really easy in comparison to the regulatory part.
Yeah, the design and development part was more fun. Okay. It was very challenging in its own right. Making a device that separates but then won't go back together, that's pretty difficult. Making a device that separates at a certain pounds of force, but also within a tight range, right? It can't separate at an average of 4 pounds plus or minus 3 pounds, right? It had to be a tight range. So, things like that were really critical kind of design and development elements. And then you get into your manufacturing where, okay, we have to ultrasonically weld this. And how are we going to manufacture this in a kind of repeatable and cost efficient way? That was its own hurdle and challenge. And then boom, getting into the regulatory. And the regulatory was tough. It's a lot of downtime. It's a lot of waiting. I use the analogy. It's like, you're throwing, you write down your message, you put it in a bag, you throw it over the fence to the FDA, and you just wait to hear back, 75 days, 45 days, 90 days. And it's very slow and, frustrating. I mean, they have a ton on their plate. I'm not complaining at all. It's that part of the process for a startup that likes to move fast was very frustrating.
Yeah, I think it's important for people that are listening that, you have really to anticipate those kind of downtime or time where it's just waiting. So maybe I have something in parallel to do also to prepare. Mm-hmm. So to not have everything aligned, it's more about a sandwich with a lot of things that can run at the same time. So while you are waiting, there is something else that you can do. So prioritizing can be also a good thing here. In terms of quality management system, so normally you have to have your design and development documentation, etc. But you have also to build, if I can say, your quality management system. So when did it happen? At which stage did you start to say, oh, now I have to create some procedural documentation? And was it more like a paper-based solution, software-based or things? So how the project for creation of a quality management system kicked off?
Yeah, so we knew really early on, since in our work with our regulatory consultant, that we were going to need to implement a quality management system at some point. I think we didn't fully implement a quality management system until 2016. So it was I think within the first year of our founding. But really, you're doing such heavy R&D at that phase that you're really just starting to create a design history file, right? You're really, that phase is more customer discovery, getting design inputs. You're not really marketing much. You're not putting out marketing documents. So really, our initial work on the quality management system was paper-based. It was pretty limited, in terms of the SOPs, standard operating practices and procedures. The SOPs that we developed, it was paper-based. It was less marketing-based. It was more product development, design history file, design traceability matrix, all of that kind of engineering and R&D focused quality management system work. But we didn't use an electronic. I know there's a lot of great systems out there. We just happen to not use it. Our regulatory consultant, they do a great job with their kind of paper-based, Dropbox-based system, and it is more virtual than I'm making it sound. Right, we're docu-signing, we're storing in Dropbox, but in terms of it being a true digital QMS system, it was not an eQMS.
Yeah,
but yeah.
So, I mean, your strategy was great because I know some companies when they are saying that they will start to build the quality management system, they focus on procedures like compliance, vigilance reporting or whatever, which makes no sense because you are the phase of design. So focus more on the design phase, documentation, then you can focus on the rest later because then it will be more a priority for you to build that. But yeah, you're right. At the beginning, focus more on what you are working on instead of something that you will maybe work on in 3 years because you will start selling your products in 3 years. So I think it's a good thing. And for paper-based system, I mean, for small companies that are just starting, I think it's a good solution, or a Dropbox system, because it's really not need to have a big thing. But yeah, as soon as you grow, if I can say, and people are spread all around the world, having paper-based is a bit difficult also. So to have people signing documents. Yeah. But okay, so in terms of one thing that I wanted to understand, because you were also discussing with FDA, so it means that you had some meeting with them, etc. So was it like they are here and they just say, no, you are wrong, you are wrong, you are wrong, or they are here to say you should maybe better do this, or you should maybe better? Was there really some kind of cordial discussion? It was more about like, no, we are just here to judge what you are doing and nothing else?
Yeah, I'd say there is back and forth, right? There is back and forth. It was, always kind of constructive, and there really wasn't much where we were saying we think you're wrong, or them saying we think you're wrong. It's really about I'll give some examples. So during the 510K period, right, where we thought we were doing 510K, we were presenting them with the testing that was required based on our predicate devices, your biocompatibility, cytotoxicity, sterilization, validation, all of those things. And so the back and forth with them at that point would be, oh, hey, in this test, we don't like how you did your positive controls and your negative controls, right? So it was a lot of really in the minutia with different people on the review panel about, this specific test, or, your sterilization validation here. Can we get more documents, or can we get more detail on this? So that was the initial kind of conversation and whatnot. And I think during that process, with a few specific tests, they were realizing, we were almost making custom tests because we were a unique device, which that's a DeNovo, right? Part of a DeNovo is you create special controls, as they're called. Those special controls are basically custom designed tests that can validate the requirements of this specific device. So I think during that back and forth on those individual pieces of testing, it kind of made them realize, hey, this is really more of a DeNovo. And then that's what caused them to kick us DeNovo. And then once we were DeNovo, though, the type of interactions changed. It's a different, usually I think it's within the same large agency, but it's a different division that handles DeNovos versus traditional 510Ks. And so when we got switched to DeNovo, the conversations were more like, they were asking for more clinical data. Okay, what does this additional clinical data need to look like? Multi-site or single site, randomized controlled trial. What's the sample size? What are our primary endpoints, secondary endpoints need to be? And so all of that, around the additional clinical study data, that turned into a really good discussion. And it was always cordial, but it was about, them trying to understand the risks that our device posed, us trying to explain the benefits and what we've done to mitigate the risk. And then us eventually getting to an agreement on the type of study, the size of the study, the endpoints, the statistical analysis, and basically give us the green light to say, we're going to go pay to do this study. It is exactly what you want. So when we come back, everyone's going to be happy if we passed our primary and secondary endpoints.
Great. So in terms of FDA, so I think, now you pass that. I think it's the main thing that you've made first is FDA. And are you planning, or maybe is it already in place, expansion to other countries, or just FDA is mainly the main market here?
Yeah, so we're absolutely kind of actively in process for expanding into different markets. We're working, as many people in your audience probably know, the new kind of MDR regulations for the European Union. I saw you done, a lot on that, but so we're working through that. we plan on being in Europe within the next 2 years. We're kind of currently working on our Korean regulatory clearance. We already have a distribution agreement signed there. We're also working on our Canadian clearance with Health Canada. So we're expanding into that market. The Korean and Canada market entrance should be within the next 12 months, 12 to 18 months, we think. But then also we launched our veterinary product in January of this year. Dogs and bulls and horses get IVs too. And guess what? They pull them out too. And they have traumatic force on the line. So we've actually done a couple clinical studies in the vet space with fantastic results. So we launched that product. Not a big market. It's about maybe 10% of the size or smaller, 5% of the size of the US, adult hospital market. But it's a significant market. And we're actually doing the vet product in Korea, I think, too. We're working on that. So absolutely, we're looking at those. Japan is another country that's kind of on that more 2 to 3 year horizon. But, this is the great thing about this product is about SafeBreak is that it's ISO standard lures on the end of the device. So we don't have to change anything to sell it in Japan or Canada or China or South America. All we have to do is change the packaging, translate the educational documents and IFU and stuff, and then get that clearance and we're good to go.
So if you go to Canada plus Japan, then plus US, you miss just 2 countries, so Australia and Brazil, to have, if I can say, to be part of the MDSAP program, so Medical Device Single Audit Program. So for those that are listening, so mainly if you are selling in those 5 countries, you can have a Medical Device Single Audit Program that will help you to avoid to have multiple audits for your company. So I think it can be a great thing.
That's a great point. I'm going to look more into that. Brazil and Australia. I forgot about that. But, it's and real quick, it's interesting. Australia has a vibrant vascular access research community. They are well funded publicly with their research, and they've got a ton of great research that always comes out of Australia. So looking forward to getting down there, even though it's not a massive market.
Yeah, but if you go for Europe, Australia is mainly following what Europe is doing. So it will be also a good thing that you can also go there at the same time. Okay, so now let's say that we start from zero. You know what you know, and you come back to the beginning. So what would you change, if I can say, on the way that you went now? So what maybe if a company now is at the beginning of their project, what will you advise them to do? Because you have made maybe those mistakes and you say, do this and do that is preferable for you.
Yeah. I'd say, with respect to the regulatory, I think having a pre-submission meeting way earlier would have been, and we never had one, but having, I think when we had one, I don't know, it was kind of mid-review, but having a pre-submission meeting earlier on would have been very, very helpful. If they would have told us during that pre-submission meeting, hey, we think you need to go DeNovo, and we said, okay, and just started down that path, it, legitimately could have saved us 1.5 years or more, because all of that time dealing with the 510K stuff, right? It would have been really truncated, and maybe it would be a year that it would have saved us, maybe not a 1.5, who knows, but it would have definitely been valuable and helpful. We would, if we would have done it early enough, we probably wouldn't have even have had to do that 40 patient trial. Maybe we could have just done, the 300 patient randomized controlled trial that we ended up doing. And so that would have saved some money too and some time. But I'd say that's the main thing, the pre-submission meeting. The other thing too is, on the indications for use, I think when you're on the company side, you're really focused on, okay, if we have our endpoints of the study and we achieve those, we can say that we aid in the reduction of, mechanical IV complications, right? Requiring an IV restart. And that's what the indication that we got was. We were thrilled about it. It's what we wanted. It was broad. And that was the kind of end result after our big study. But I think, like what I talked about previously, the predicate device substantial equivalency is heavily influenced by intended use and indications for use. Yeah. So the thinking there is that if we would have kind of gone less aggressive on what we were trying to get claims for, that we may have even been able to skate through the 510K pathway, right? Okay. So the other piece of that too is, clinicians in the field, they don't really care about what your indications are a lot of the times. And really, when I say that they don't care about what your indications are, I'm meaning, they don't really care. They care if you're indicated for use with pediatrics or with certain, compatibility stuff, But in terms of like what you say you do, they're going to look at the clinical data, right? What does your RCT say? I don't care what your IFU says as much. What's your RCT say that you do? So that was, that's just some learning there. And then, maybe the last thing is, and I think we did a decent job of this, but kind of thinking that it's going to take, there's a buddy of mine, Jordan Mickleby, I'll shout him out, with Merge Medical. He has a rule of pi. It's always going to take 3.14 times as long and cost 3.14 times as much money as you think it will. So I think having that lens at the start would have allowed us to kind of timeline, set expectations with investors, raise the appropriate amount of capital to really get us through the milestones instead of having to raise multiple times on our way to those milestones. But I think we did a good job of that. But I think just kind of keeping that in the back of our head at the beginning would have been better.
No, but I think it's good because you say it's like if you say that, if you have planned for 1 million, plan for 3.5 million. If you have planned for 1 year, plan for 3.5 years. So it's more like, I mean, you can try 1 million, but make the worst case, it can be 3.5 years because of that. So I think it's also good advice maybe for the audience here. In terms of your journey, so as I said, you normally when we see this kind of product, it's like we think it's linear, it goes in one direction, it's fine, and everything would be okay. But it's more like a bump up and down. So what helped you, if I can say at a certain point, to not say I give up here because it's a bit too much now, or if I didn't have that, to be maybe a problem for me on my journey. So because we have people that are at the first, if I can say, bump, think it's to never work, but in reality we have just to think that the project is not linear. It will be a lot of hikes and downs. So it's mainly something that can be a big problem. So what helped you, if I can say, during this journey?
Yeah, specifically on the regulatory piece, I think having a really, good, skilled kind of regulatory consultant or regulatory firm that you trust and that helps you a lot. And then I'd say kind of as an addendum or a bolt-on to that, what was really helpful for us too is having, regulatory consultants or kind of key consultants that specialize in certain things. Like maybe it's someone that worked at the FDA for 6 years. Yeah. We have a statistical analysis consultant. All they do is statistical analysis, right? And so maybe a sterilization validation expert. So having those really, really niche, specific consultants and clinical experts was really key. I'd also say the human interaction piece, like ask for an in-person meeting or try to, when you're having those interactions, the human interaction and kind of the in-person meeting we had was great. We showed them that we're an honest company, we're honest brokers, we're coming to you in good faith and working in good faith. We want to keep patients safe. We just want to speak clearly about the risks and benefits. And I think, that goes a long way because some of what the FDA does is subjective, and knowing they're working with quality, honest people is a really important piece. Never get adversarial, never get angry. It's you really have to understand that they've got a big job to keep people safe. And so never get cross with them if you can help it. But I'd say those are the big things that, helped me along the way on this journey.
No, I think it's great. So thank you. I mean, your journey looks amazing now that we see it and we hear it. But I imagine that during that time, it was really sometimes maybe a nightmare. So for people that are listening, learn from this kind of journey so that you can maybe not make the same mistake. Here we talk about a specific product, but it's the same for any other product. So go through the same pathway that Spencer has talked about. And I hope it will be really helping you. So Spencer, where people can follow up with you if they want to see again your product, because as we said, you showed that on the video, so maybe they want to see that maybe on the website. So do you have a website or something where people can go?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website's www.lineusmed.com. That's LINEUSMED.com. So there's tons of videos, pictures of the device, and you can get access to the clinical study data, all that good stuff. We're also on LinkedIn. Lineus Medical, again, is the name. You can find me on there. We've only got, I think, 9 employees at this point. So there's not a whole Rolodex of a directory to go through. And then we're going to be at the Association for Vascular Access conference in Minneapolis. It's at the end of September. So we're going to be there. That's our big show for the year. If you're there, please come by the booth and grab us. But feel free to reach out at our email address, info@lineusmed.com. And we'll happy to help any way I can on your journey in the audience. So
Yeah, so don't hesitate to go on LinkedIn and just say hello to him on LinkedIn by chat, just to say that you saw maybe his episode, and you are really happy of what he was doing. So great. So great. So anyway, everything will be on the show notes, so people can go directly there. If you want to go to see the website, see the journey, and see also how to contact Spencer with his details. Okay, Spencer, it was really a pleasure to have you on the episode. I hope really what you have shared with us will help the others, and I hope you will be also having a lot of success with the other regions, because as you talked about Europe, Korea, etc. So these are all different regulations. So you will have to go also through this kind of burden, if I can say, with other regulations. But we can talk about that maybe on another episode if you come back again.
For sure, Monir, and thank you for having me. This was an absolute pleasure. It's fun to get to kind of nerd out on the regulatory side of things. So really appreciate it. I hope the audience enjoyed it. I tried to be as informative as possible, and hopefully it helps someone. But happy to reach out to anyone in the audience, or happy to follow up with any in the audience that would like to get in contact with me. But thank you again for having me on the podcast.
No problem. Thanks to you, and I wish you a nice day.
Yeah, take care.
Bye.